let me tell you, those daycare costs hit different when you actually call and get a quote and they tell you it's the cost of a mortgage, okay? Hey guys, it's Fo and I'm back with another video. In this video, I'm going to share 7 things that you can do to financially prepare for having a baby and future kids. So if you're interested in learning what you can do, stay tuned. So the first thing that I want to talk about may sound a little bit morbid or a little bit sad, but the reality is it's something that you need to do in order to financially prepare for children, and that is get life insurance. If you are a living, breathing adult with children, you need to have life insurance. Life insurance is just a way for you to financially prepare if something were to happen to you. It gives you the ability to cover end-of-life expenses and to replace your income in case of a sudden death, so that your children are able to financially continue forward and not have to worry about finances, but they have the money in order to be taken care of by whomever you choose to leave your children with. There are so many options for life insurance. There are so many different kinds of life insurance policies that you can get. We personally have term life insurance that will cover our children through adulthood. However, there is whole life insurance. There are so many options that are available, and I actually have a podcast episode which I'll link in the description box where I talk to a life insurance agent and she walks through the different options that you have. Nonetheless, it is a financial tool that you can use to have financial means if something happens to you. Again, end-of-life expenses and to replace your income if something were to happen. So you want to have life insurance so that your children are financially covered in the case of an emergency. The second thing that you want to have is a will. You want to get a will. Again, not to sound all depressing, but I've watched a lot of these videos and no one seems to touch on these very important things. Yes, we want to budget, yes, we want to save, but we need to financially prepare with things like life insurance and a will. So my husband and I got a will probably 2 years into our marriage, before we even were pregnant or were thinking about kids, but we wanted to have a plan in place for our assets in case something happened to us. So what would happen to our home, what would happen to our cars and other assets that we have, who would our beneficiaries be, and when we had kids, who would be able to take custody of our children, who would be able to handle the finances associated with taking care of our children. Those were all things that we wanted to have laid out before kids came along. Now, we actually work with an attorney, which is what I recommend, because they can walk you through your personal situation. There are tons of websites online where you can create a will, but I think it helps when you have someone who can walk you through your specific situation and create a plan just for you. So we were able to sit down with our attorney, walk him through our assets and what we desire, and he was able to draft up a will that outlined everything that would happen in the event if something happened to us, what would happen to our kids. Now, we did this before we even got pregnant, but it was written in such a way that we can always come back and add our kids' names so that we can list them specifically as beneficiaries and have their names specifically outlined in our will. But you want to have a will in place so that there is a plan in case something happens to you. It's not the most joyous thing to talk about with your family and your friends, but it is a necessary conversation, and it is necessary to financially prepare for having children. The third thing that you want to do is to check your medical insurance coverage. So before you have a child, or if you're thinking about having a child, it's important to understand what is covered by your insurance and what is not. So one thing that I did prior to us even getting pregnant was I had conversation with friends and family to understand how much it costs to have a kid, as far as labor, delivery, doctor's appointments, all those things. And I got a general idea of what it costs, but then I went to my insurance company website and I saw exactly how much of those expenses were covered, and then going to the doctor, we actually got an outline of what was covered and how much we had to pay out of pocket. So it's important to understand exactly financially how much you need to prepare for before the baby's even born. So those doctor's appointments, those ultrasounds, all of that stuff costs money, and everyone's insurance policy is different, meaning some people may cover 100%, some may not. So you want to know that up front so that you can start saving or start making adjustments to your budget in order to cover that expense. You want to be sure to know exactly what is covered so that you're not taken by surprise and you're not paying for things that you don't have to pay for. The other thing that you want to understand is how much it will cost to add a dependent to your health insurance policy. So that's one thing that I actually discuss with one of my HR representatives, how much extra are you going to take out of my paycheck if I add a child as a dependent to my healthcare coverage. Those are things that you want to be financially aware of so that you can make the appropriate steps and make the necessary changes in order to be able to afford those things, because your child is going to need health insurance. They're going to have to go to the doctor. They're going to have to get shots if you so choose. So those are things that you will have to pay for, and you need to know exactly how much extra it's going to cost you so you can decide whether or not, in our case, if the child's going to go on my health insurance or if it'll go on my husband's health insurance. But those are all questions that you need to ask up front before the child even gets here. The fourth thing that you want to do is research daycare costs, because let me tell you, honey, I remember my friends always talking about how expensive daycare was, but I never knew exactly how much it cost. And let me tell you, those daycare costs hit different when you actually call and get a quote and they tell you it's the cost of a mortgage, okay? Now, obviously, those costs are going to vary based on where you live. In our area, the average cost was around $1,200, so it's super expensive for daycare costs. And unfortunately, not everyone has the ability to stay home and take care of their children from the home. So you need to understand, how much is it going to cost you to put your child in daycare? Do you want to use daycare? Do you want to hire a nanny? Because a nanny actually may be cheaper than doing daycare. So those are all the things that you need to understand. How much is it going to cost to care for your child so that you can start saving ahead of time and you're not surprised and taken aback when you actually call them and they tell you how much it costs, and they don't blink an eye, they don't bat, they don't stutter, they just tell you it costs the cost of a mortgage. So be prepared, do your research, and understand what you can afford and plan accordingly. The fifth thing that you want to do is actually talk to your employer about your options and your benefits. So well before we started thinking about having kids, when I started my job, I sat down with our HR manager to go over what the maternity leave policy was. Now, I work at a place where the majority of the workforce was older, so they really weren't having to worry about people being out having kids. So when I came and I was young, I was married, and I was thinking about having kids, it was probably like, okay, we need to readdress this. So I sat down and had a conversation to understand what that policy was. Now, later on when I actually got pregnant, very early on, I went back to HR and had the conversation with them. What is the policy? Has it changed? How much of my paycheck will I actually receive? What percentage? All those things, and we had that discussion. I wanted to have the conversation early on because I wanted to be able to financially plan in case there was a reduction in my income. So I wanted to be able to save to make that difference. And for some people, that may mean taking on a second job to make up the difference in what you'll lose in your paycheck. So some people don't get maternity leave, so that's one thing you will need to understand. Do you even get that benefit on your job? Do you have to take unpaid time? Do you have to take FMLA? Those are all things that you need to understand before you have a child so that you can make an informed decision. And even if you aren't the mother, if you're the father, go talk to an HR person to find out if you get paternity leave. Is it paid? Do you have to take unpaid time? Do you have to take FMLA? Do you have to take vacation? Those are all things that you want to know ahead of time so you're not scrambling or surprised when it's time to have this baby and they're like, you're not getting paid. So talk to your HR person, understand what your benefits are, but you also want to talk to them because there may be incentives that you get for like daycare reimbursement. That's one thing I found out, that there was an option to be able to get reimbursed or have money put towards daycare that I wouldn't have known had I not gone to talk to them. So make sure you talk to your HR, your employer, to find out what your benefits and options are. The sixth thing, which is kind of obvious that you want to start doing, is to save as soon as possible. I just talked about a whole bunch of expenses that you're going to incur. Daycare costs, medical costs if it's not covered by your insurance. You're going to have to pay to get a will done. That's attorney costs. Like, their life insurance is an additional cost if you don't have it. So you want to start saving as soon as possible. So some things that you want to start saving for. You want to start saving for maternity clothes. I know that may sound trivial, but that's an expense that you're going to incur. You're going to have to get maternity bras. You're going to have to get maternity pants. Like, you're going to have to get items that are going to help you through your pregnancy. I recommend, as I learned on my own, buying things like maxi dresses and putting that in your budget, because those are clothes that you can wear during pregnancy and after, so it will be a good investment to make. So I actually leave a link to the maxi dresses that I purchased to help me through my pregnancy, but you want to put that in your budget as something that you need to save for. Another thing that I've mentioned in my bank accounts video is I talked about having a baby bank account. So We open a bank account exclusively for childcare costs, baby costs. If people gave us money, that's where the money would go towards. So that's where we started saving for things that we have to buy and expenses that we'll incur because we're having a child. So I would highly recommend actually having an account exclusively for baby items. Now, if you're able to, another thing that I would recommend is also maxing out your HSA. So we had a unique case, well, it may not be unique, but we have a case where I was pregnant in 2019, but I'm not having the baby until 2020. So what happens at the start of the year, all of your deductibles, all of your out-of-pocket max, all that stuff resets, it starts over. So all the medical expenses that I had in 2019 won't apply to 2020. So that means that I have to start all over before I reach my out-of-pocket max and reach my deductible before my insurance actually starts paying like 100% of my costs. So to help reduce the amount that we actually have to pay out of our budget, we decided to up how much we put in HSA in 2019 because that money rolls over. Now, if you don't know what HSA is, it's a health savings account that is a tax incentive, which basically when you put money in that account, it's tax-free and it reduces your taxable income. So you're able to use it for health-related expenses. So we put additional money in 2019 knowing that we would probably not spend it until 2020, but the money was able to roll over. So coming into 2020, our HSA account isn't at zero. We have funds that we can start using to pay for those expenses that are not covered by our insurance. So I hope that makes sense. If you're able to do it, definitely max it out, put additional funds in there, knowing that it's going to reduce your taxable income if you increase it as you incrementally put in with your paycheck. Again, I hope that makes sense. If you have an HSA account, you probably understand what I mean, but it all rolls over, so it's able to be applied to 2020 expenses to help reduce the burden of trying to reach that out-of-pocket max or deductible. So those are things that you should definitely start saving for as soon as possible. Again, the other thing is once you've talked to your employer and you understand if you're going to get maternity leave, how much you get paid, this is where you can make the decision of whether or not you need to pick up a second job, a side hustle, to help start bringing in additional funds to cover the costs that you will incur. The seventh and final thing that you want to do is to start paying down debt to free up cash. So obviously I mentioned a lot of expenses that you're going to incur and things that you need to think about financially when it comes to having kids. But the best thing that you can probably do is to start paying down debt. You may not be able to pay it all off before the baby comes, but pay down debt so that you can free up cash to do all of these things. That is the one thing that I will say has helped us out tremendously because we are debt free outside of our mortgage. We're able to put the additional funds towards things that we need for the baby, to save and have all those things situated so that when the time comes and when we need those that money, it'll be there and we made the proper taking the proper steps in order to financially prepare. So definitely take this time to start paying down debt so that you can free up cash, so that having labor and delivery, having the baby is not as much of a financial burden, and you don't have to get into more debt in order to have a child, because that's not what you want to do. You want everything that comes into your life to be a blessing and not a burden, and you definitely want your child to be a blessing and not a financial burden to you. I hope all this helped. These are the 7 things that you need to do to financially prepare for having a baby. I wanted to offer something that most people weren't talking about. Most people were not talking about life insurance. They aren't talking about having a will or talking to your employer or reviewing your health insurance. A lot of people just want to tell you to budget and save, but there's more to it. There are so many more things that you need to do to financially prepare. So I hope that this video was helpful for you. Definitely check out the description box for resources as far as podcast episodes. I do have a budgeting template. The Mama Money Manual is something new that I'm introducing that has an outline of budgeting, how to budget, tips and tricks on how to save money and how to earn more money. So definitely want to check that out in the description box below. All right, guys, that's it for this video. I'll talk to you in the next video. Bye.